Three women entered the extraordinary world of Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah, a man whose wealth seemed almost impossible to imagine, with one of the largest palaces on earth. One was his childhood sweetheart and royal cousin. Another began life as a flight attendant before becoming his wife and living inside a palace of her own. The third was a television journalist who became the Sultan's youngest bride. All three experienced the unimaginable privilege of being married to one of the world's richest monarchs, but none of their stories ended the same way. One remained the queen, another lost her title, her royal status, and the palace she once called home, and the third left the royal household after a marriage that lasted only 5 years. Behind the gold, the diamonds, and the unimaginable wealth of Brunei's royal family lies a story of love, rivalry, heartbreak, divorce, and a devastating loss that even a sultan's fortune could not prevent. This is the true story of Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah, the man behind the crown, the palace, and the three women whose marriages to him captured the world's attention. To understand how these three women came to occupy such different places in the Sultan's life, we have to go back to the beginning, before the palaces, before the unimaginable fortune, before the three marriages that would attract attention around the world. There was a young prince preparing to inherit one of Asia's oldest monarchies. Hassanal Bolkiah was born into the House of Bolkiah, a dynasty that had ruled Brunei for centuries. His father was Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin III, the man remembered as the architect of modern Brunei. And from the moment Hassanal was born, his future was already decided. He was not simply a prince, he was the heir to the throne. At the age of 15, his life changed forever when he was named Crown Prince. 6 years later, tragedy struck the royal family. His father abdicated the throne, and at just 21 years old, Hassanal Bolkiah became the 29th Sultan of Brunei. He inherited a small kingdom on the island of Borneo, but beneath its land lay something that would transform his reign and his family's fortune forever: oil. As Brunei's petroleum wealth grew, so did the power and wealth of its ruling family. The young sultan soon became one of the richest monarchs on earth. But while his kingdom was entering a new era of extraordinary prosperity, his personal life was also about to take an important turn. And the first woman to stand beside him was someone he had known long before he became sultan. Her name was Pangeran Anak Saleha. She was his cousin, and she came from Brunei's royal family herself. Their families already knew each other, their lives had been connected since childhood, and eventually, the decision was made for the two young royals to marry. Saleha was 18 years old, Hassanal was 19. They were young, but their wedding was anything but ordinary. The celebrations stretched over weeks, transforming the marriage into one of the most spectacular royal occasions Brunei had ever witnessed. Thousands of guests gathered to celebrate the union. Inside the Grand Mosque, the young couple exchanged their vows, surrounded by the country's most important figures. Outside, crowds gathered to catch a glimpse of the royal celebration. The bride and groom appeared in magnificent ceremonial clothing, surrounded by the glitter of precious jewels. It was the beginning of a marriage that placed Saleha at the very heart of Brunei's royal family. For 15 years, she remained the Sultan's only wife. Then came the children, 6 of them. Among them was a son who carried a destiny almost as heavy as his father's, Al-Muhtadi Billah, the Crown Prince of Brunei. For Saleha, everything appeared secure. She was the Sultan's first wife, she was the mother of the future king, and she had known the man beside her since they were young. But then, after 15 years of marriage, another woman entered the Sultan's life. And suddenly, the position Saleha had occupied alone for so many years was no longer hers alone. Her name was Mariam Abdul Aziz, and she came from a completely different world. Mariam Abdul Aziz was not born into Brunei's royal family. She grew up far from the world of royal ceremonies, jeweled crowns, and palace walls. She was a flight attendant. Then, one day, fate brought her aboard a Royal Brunei Airlines flight carrying the Sultan. According to the story that has circulated for years, something unexpected happened during the journey. Mariam accidentally spilled a drink on the monarch. For anyone else, it might have been an embarrassing mistake. But this was the Sultan of Brunei. The people waiting to welcome him were reportedly horrified when he stepped off the aircraft with his clothes drenched. Yet the incident did not end Mariam's career. Instead, her life took a turn that almost no one could have predicted. In 1981, Hassanal Bolkiah married the flight attendant who had once accidentally spilled a drink on him. Mariam had entered the world of Brunei's royal family. The Sultan reportedly built a separate palace for her, and she accompanied him on international journeys and appeared beside him at important occasions. Over time, she became an established figure within the royal household. But there was another woman who had been beside the Sultan long before Mariam arrived. Saleha was still his first wife, still queen, and still the mother of the crown prince. The royal household now had two wives, each occupying a very different place in the Sultan's life. Mariam was the younger wife who had entered the palace from outside the royal world. Saleha was the woman who had known the Sultan since childhood, the first wife, the queen, and the mother of the future king. No one outside the family could know exactly how the balance between them was changing. Publicly, Saleha continued to carry the dignity of the queen. Yet her life became increasingly associated with another world, the world of luxury. She developed a reputation for an extraordinary collection of jewelry and designer handbags, rare pieces, expensive pieces, objects that most people could only dream of owning. Her love of luxury became part of her public image. But there was another interpretation. Some observers believed the queen's fascination with jewels and handbags represented something deeper, a way to fill the silence that came with life inside a palace, loneliness. Whether that was true, only Saleha herself could know. But one thing remained certain. No matter who entered the Sultan's life, Saleha held a position that was difficult to challenge. She remained the first wife, she remained queen, and her eldest son remained the crown prince. Meanwhile, Mariam's place within the royal family grew even deeper. She became the mother of 4 of the Sultan's children, and her life was now inseparable from the royal household. For more than 2 decades, she lived as a member of one of the world's most powerful royal families. She had gone from working as a flight attendant to becoming the Sultan's wife. She had a palace of her own. She traveled alongside the monarch, and she was raising 4 royal children. From the outside, her position seemed secure. But royal marriages can change behind closed doors long before the public ever hears about it. For 22 years, Mariam remained by the Sultan's side. Then, in 2003, everything changed. After 22 years of marriage, Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah and Mariam Abdul Aziz were divorced. The news marked the end of a marriage that had once seemed firmly established within the royal family. But the reason behind the divorce remained a mystery. The palace never publicly revealed the full story, and in the absence of an explanation, rumors began to circulate. Some claimed the Sultan had simply fallen out of love. Others suggested that something more serious had happened behind the palace walls. something Mariam had done that the monarch could not forgive. But none of those stories were ever officially confirmed. The public was left with only one certainty: the marriage was over. And with the divorce came a dramatic change in Mariam's position. She lost her royal title, her state honors were taken away, and the palace that had once represented her place beside the Sultan was no longer hers. After more than 2 decades, the woman who had entered the royal family as a young flight attendant was suddenly outside the life she had known for most of her adult years. But there was something she could never lose: her children. Mariam had 4 children with the Sultan, and they remained members of the Bruneian royal family. Their connection to the palace continued, even as their mother's relationship with the Sultan came to an end. For Mariam, the divorce meant losing her position as the Sultan's wife. But the story of her family was far from over, because years later, another tragedy struck, and this time there was no palace, no royal title, and no fortune that could protect her from it. Her eldest son, Prince Abdulazim, was facing a battle of his own. Born into unimaginable wealth, Azim grew up with opportunities that few people in the world could ever dream of. But the life expected of a prince did not seem to be the life he wanted. He was not drawn to the traditional path of military service or politics. Instead, his interests led him toward the world of film, entertainment, and international celebrity. He found a place for himself in the entertainment industry and became involved in film production. He traveled, attended high-profile events, and developed friendships with famous figures around the world. For a young man born inside a palace, he appeared determined to create an identity beyond his royal title. He wanted a life that belonged to him, and for a time, it seemed he had found it. But behind the glamorous photographs and celebrity events, a far more serious battle was unfolding. Azim became seriously ill. His health began to deteriorate, and the family faced a reality that no amount of wealth could change. In 2020, Prince Abdul Azim died. He was only 38 years old. For his mother Mariam, it was a loss that overshadowed everything that had come before. The divorce, the loss of her title, the palace she had once called home. None of it could compare to losing her son. Brunei entered a period of mourning following the prince's death. A nation that had watched him grow up now mourned a royal life that had ended far too soon. And for the Sultan, the tragedy carried a painful lesson. He was a man who could seemingly buy almost anything: palaces, private aircraft, rare cars, priceless works of art, a life surrounded by extraordinary luxury. But when it came to his own son, even the wealth of a sultan could not change the outcome. And while Mariam's story had taken a heartbreaking turn, the sultan's personal life was already entering another chapter. There was another woman waiting in the wings, a woman who came from yet another world entirely. Her name was Azrinaz Mazar Hakim, and she was about to become the sultan's third wife. Azrinaz Mazar Hakim came from a world completely different from the one the sultan had known with his first 2 wives. She was Malaysian, and she was already familiar with life in front of the cameras. Azrinaz worked as a television journalist and presenter, building a career in the media before her life took an unexpected turn. In 2005, she married Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah. She was 34 years younger than the sultan. The marriage immediately attracted attention. Once again, a woman from outside Brunei's traditional royal circle had entered the life of the country's most powerful man. But this time, the story moved quickly. Azrinaz became a mother to 2 children with the sultan. For a while, the marriage appeared to settle into a new chapter of royal family life. But behind the public ceremonies and official appearances, the relationship did not last. 5 years after the wedding, the Sultan announced their divorce. In 2010, Azrinaz's marriage to the Sultan came to an end. She lost her royal titles and honors and eventually returned to Malaysia. Her life had changed dramatically. Years earlier, she had been a television journalist. Then she became the wife of one of the world's richest monarchs. Now, after only 5 years, she was no longer part of the royal household in the same way. But the divorce raised another deeply personal question. What would happen to the children? They remained members of Brunei's royal family, while their mother began a new chapter of her life outside the palace. The details of what happened between Azrinaz and her children after the divorce have been the subject of reports and speculation over the years. Some accounts have claimed that her contact with them became limited. Other details remain private, known only to those inside the royal family. Whatever the truth behind the palace walls, the end of the marriage marked another dramatic chapter in the Sultan's personal life. 3 women had now entered his world. 3 marriages had taken place, and 3 very different stories had unfolded. Saleha remained the queen. Mariam lost her royal position after more than 2 decades of marriage, and Azrinaz left the royal household after only 5 years. Yet the story of the 3 wives was only one part of the Sultan's extraordinary life, because behind the marriages was a man who had spent decades ruling one of the world's wealthiest nations, a monarch surrounded by extraordinary luxury, a father of many children, and a ruler whose family life had become just as fascinating to the world as his fortune. At the center of it all stood Hassanal Bolkiah, still the Sultan, still on the throne, and still surrounded by a family whose story was far from over. So, what do you think of the extraordinary life of Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah? Was he simply a powerful monarch living a life of unimaginable privilege? Or is there a deeper story behind the palace walls that the world will never truly know? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey into one of the world's most fascinating royal families, don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of royalty, power, wealth, and the secrets hidden behind the crown.